The ideas, procedures, and suggestions contained within this podcast are not intended as a substitute for consulting with a medical professional. All matters regarding your health and fitness require medical consultation and supervision. Welcome to the Warrior Wellness Podcast, a podcast for military members, veterans, and first responders focusing on fitness, health, nutrition, and biohacking. Our mission with this podcast is to introduce America's heroes to lifestyle habits and hacks that will help them live healthier, happier lives, and in turn, be fit enough to continue their support of their communities and country.
Welcome to another episode of the Warrior Wellness Podcast. I am your podcast host, Steph Lincoln, former Army captain and founder and CEO of Fire Team Whiskey Military Fitness. So today I'm sitting down with Aaron Quinones, also known as Sergeant Q, so I'll probably just call him that. A little easier to say. He is the Senior Executive Director of Operation Pop Smoke. So you're going to learn all about this organization here in a second. Aaron is a Marine veteran who specialized in communication as a forward observer when he was a Marine. And Pop Smoke, Operation Pop Smoke, has an app called the Pop Smoke app. And it's a complete peer-to-peer support structure designed to connect peers anywhere in the world at any time to provide aid when you need it or when someone needs you. So this app was designed by veterans for veterans using proven tactics and techniques with the latest technologies, helping veterans transition to civilian life in suicide prevention. This app can be used by anyone. And it has a built-in support structure that can be used to support someone you know or built within a community so you can provide each other help at any time. So it's a pretty cool concept. Pretty intrigued by this app and especially the way you pop smoke. So we'll talk more about that. If you've ever been in the military, you know what that means, but it takes on a whole new meaning within this app. So it's pretty interesting the way they use this concept in the app on having people kind of get themselves help whenever they need it the most. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Sergeant Q from Operation Pop Smoke.
Introducing the new Fire Team Whiskey Fitness and Nutrition app. Everything you need to get fit and lose weight right at your fingertips. Choose from hundreds of fitness videos and fitness plans. Search for workouts by fitness level, equipment available, or body part focus. Choose from several nutrition plans and customize your macros. Your entire fitness, nutrition, and wellness plan all scheduled on your calendar. Text a trainer anytime for tips, tricks, and motivation. Achieve your fitness and health goals with the Fire Team Whiskey app. Go to www.fireteamwhiskey.com to get 2 weeks of results for free.
All right. Well, Sergeant Q, thank you so much for being on the Warrior Wellness Podcast. We have so much to talk about, so let's just dive right in. So tell us a little bit about your background. You're a Marine. I won't say former Marine because Marines are never former. They're always Marines.
That's right.
So, and how you and how you kind of got involved in Operation Pop Smoke, and we'll talk about your other curriculum here in a second. But give us your background.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so I grew up actually in the mountains of Northern California. I grew up in a small little mountain town called Mad River. And so I think my graduating class in 1997 was like 7 or 8 students. It wasn't a whole lot. So if you don't know where Mad River is, it's right in the middle of what we call the Emerald Triangle. And so it's between Redding and Eureka, California, way up in the mountains. And they call it the Emerald Triangle because that's where all the marijuana was being grown back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and pretty much 90s. That's where all the marijuana was being grown. And that's right where I grew up. So there's nothing out there but a bunch of hippies, outlaws, and loggers, really. And so that's right where I grew up in this community. And so I grew up I grew up in the drug trade, experiencing a lot of violence, a lot of crime. And I didn't really understand that wasn't normal. It was just how I grew up. And so I wasn't really taught to, I wasn't never taught to hate the police. I was just taught to kind of be wary of them and stay away from them. And so that's what I did pretty much my whole life, which is kind of funny now because now I work very closely with the Auburn Police Department. And I also work with the LA County Sheriff's with talking to them about mental health. I do a lot of mental health training for the police up here in Washington, and I'm actually on the police advisory board here in Auburn, where my headquarters is at. So I do a lot of work now with the police, which is just kind of funny that I'm in that space now. But it's helped me grow a lot as well in my mental health and my robust, mental health program, because now I have to face some of those things, those traumas that I experienced as a kid, and go through that. And so growing up in that community was really, it was really tough, but as a kid, it really shaped me and molded me. So when I joined the military, it wasn't as much of a hardship for me as it was for some of these other guys that came in, because I grew up with limited power, with no indoor running water or bathroom facilities. We had an outhouse. We had to cut our own firewood, hunt our own food. I grew up out in the wilderness. And so when I joined the Marines and we're going out and doing field training and stuff like that, like, I'm like, this isn't hard. It was pretty easy for me because I had grown up dealing with that hardship. And so I'd become accustomed to that. So for me, boot camp and some of the training I went through, especially with like First Anglico, a lot of that is outdoor training. A lot of that is land navigation and things like that guys really struggled with. And for me, I just didn't, because I had grown up and had already had such a robust experience dealing with hardship that it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't until I came back from Iraq and I experienced some trauma there that all of that stuff from my childhood started coming back and kind of compounding me. And I started really studying about the brain and mental health and how the brain functioned. And I realized, like, oh, wow, okay, so that stuff that I dealt with as a kid wasn't really normal. And actually, not only do I have to unpack the stuff from Iraq, but I also have to unpack some of that stuff from my childhood. And so if your listeners are out there and you really don't understand what that means, there's a great documentary that was done a few years ago. It's called Murder Mountain. And it's about the drug trade and how it operates up there in Northern California. And so I didn't live on Murder Mountain. I lived on the back side of that, just a little bit north from there. But everything in that documentary is accurate. It's just barely scratching the surface of what actually goes on there in those mountains in Northern California. And so growing up there, it's definitely a unique experience. It's not like growing up in the city or growing up like here in Auburn. I mean, it was very kind of a way set apart from the rest of the world, and I didn't realize that until I became an adult and started researching these things and learning about it. But that's how I grew up. And it definitely, there were pros and cons to it. And I look back and there's a lot of my friends that grew up in that same environment, and a lot of them didn't make it out. A lot of them kind of got stuck in what I call the victim mentality, where they're just a perpetual victim of their circumstances, where they can never take responsibility for anything that happened to them. They're always getting fired. They're always, losing relationships, friendships, and it's always somebody else's fault, right? It's always somebody else. They never take any personal responsibility. And I understand that because that was me for a very, very, very long time. And through studying the brain and how it operates and dealing with mental health, I learned that there's really kind of three basic camps that everybody falls into regarding mental health. And I call it the victim mentality, the denier camp, and the, the denier camp and the, lost my train of thought. I apologize. My son was trying to call me. So there's really three main camps that people fall into.
Right.
There's the victim mentality, the denier camp, and then there's the third camp, which I call the silent majority. And so the victim mentality are people, and I lived in this mentality for a long time, people who are just a victim of their circumstance. They never really take any personal responsibility for their healing, and they just blame other people. And they just live there. And we all know people like that, right? Who just constantly are a perpetual victim of their circumstance. And then we have on the other side, which I lived in this camp too, just because I didn't understand it when I was in the military, which I call the denier camp, which is which is like, oh, mental health, it's not really a big deal. And people who are dealing with trauma and PTSD, that's for those guys, those old Vietnam vets, those guys who've had multiple tours overseas, those guys who have Bronze Stars and Navy Crosses. Like those are the guys who get PTSD, not your average soldier like me. I don't, so I lived in that denier camp. And a lot of times you hear people in the denier camp say things like, oh, well, they're just faking it, or they just need to get over it, or they're a malingerer, which was a very common term. I don't know about in the Army, but in the Marine Corps, it's a very common term. Oh, he's malingering, right? Which means that he's not really hurt. He may be hurt a little bit, but he's exaggerating it. Those kind of terms get thrown around. But then we have what we call the silent majority. And I think this is the largest group, and it's where most of us are probably at right now. It's people who've dealt with mental health or dealt with trauma, but they're still surviving. They're thriving. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're pastors, they're business owners, they're police, they're fire, they're EMT, they're military, they're moms, they're dads. They're doing all these great things in the world, but they've struggled with mental health, or they're currently struggling with it right now, but they're too afraid to say anything about it, because they don't want the people on the right, the denier camp, painting them as the people on the left, the victim mentality. And so they stay quiet. And this is the worst thing that we can do, because if we stay quiet about our mental health struggles, it just continues to perpetuate those two negative stereotypes, which are minority camps. Because you see, when you and I come forward and we're talking about mental health and we're sharing our struggles and we're being transparent with people about things that we deal with, it changes the conversation for everybody. For the people on the left who are in that victim mentality, it gives them hope, and that they can do better and be better. And hope is a huge catalyst for change. It's the number one catalyst for survival, according to Johns Hopkins University. And then on the right, the people who are in the denier camp, it changes what they think mental health is. Because I own a very successful janitorial company that I started when I was homeless. And now I have over 110 employees here in the Pacific Northwest. I have an award-winning nonprofit. I own commercial real estate, and I have a new technology startup called Operation Pop Smoke. And I've done all of that. And I still tell people, like, yeah, I still deal with depression. I still deal with anxiety. And those people in the denier camp, they look at me and say, well, you have all this success. Like, why you deal with mental health? It changes their idea of what they think people with mental health issues are, because they think that they're broken, they're helpless, they can't do anything, and it changes their perspective. But the main thing that it does is the people who are in the silent majority, it empowers other people to step forward and say, hey, I struggle too, and start the conversation with their own friends and family about mental health. And that's the number one thing.
I love that you brought that up. That is so huge. And I don't think this is talked about like ever, really, like, right? I mean, ever. I love that you said that, because, I think what a lot of us, the way we approach life is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Right.
Right.
And so if you have this idea of people who struggle with mental health issues and they're broken and they're homeless, or they're losing their jobs, they're alcoholics and all that kind of stuff, the typical Vietnam veteran that we see on the streets. Right. So, if you're not having those struggles, but you're still struggling internally, and that things are not optimal, right? And there's some things that you would love to feel a little bit better about, not experience. You kind of push it back, because you're like, well, I don't have a mental health problem. Like, I'm not like that guy on the side of the road, or that alcoholic I see out in front of the the liquor store. So, I'll just leave it be. It's that, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But what you don't realize, like you said, is that this is kind of dangerous, because, if it's there, I think of it as, it's a seed, and it was planted there by whatever it may have been that you went through, whether it be trauma, or maybe genetically you have just susceptibility for depression, or maybe you just eat a lot of freaking junk food and your serotonin's in the tank, which is what I do with my clients. It's like, hey, how about we just clean up your diet, and maybe your body can produce some serotonin, you can feel a little bit better. So, whatever it may be, that seed is there, and it's not going to go away. So it's going to grow. It might be growing slowly, but you're going to start to have some struggles eventually. You may be pretty successful, like Certain Q right here, but he identified, hey, I need to work on this, because if I don't, it's going to grow into something bigger, and it is going to start to get at the roots of my life and start, making me fail in some areas and struggle in some areas that I'm not struggling in right now.
That's absolutely correct. It's, a lot of times we look at the stuff that's happened to us and we're in that victim mentality where, like I said, we're just a victim. And I call this the slingshot analogy, where, if you picture a rock, a rock's not going to really travel very far in our lifetime, right? It's going to pretty much stay where it's at. Now you could pick that thing up and you could toss it and it may go a little ways. But if you take that same rock and you put it in a slingshot, the farther you pull that slingshot back, when you release it, it's going to launch that rock farther than anybody ever thought possible. And so I tell people that we are that rock, and all that trauma and pain and abuse that you may have experienced in your life, that's all the things that are pulling you back, holding you back. And you're absolutely right. All of those things are holding you back, right? Growing up in poverty, growing up in an abusive situation, growing up in the drug trade, growing up with violence, all of that stuff, in a poor neighborhood where it's access to poor education, all that stuff truly is holding you back. It really is. But it's only holding you back because you refuse to let go of it. You see, the moment that you let go of all that pain and past hurt and stop using it as an excuse not to excel, that's when it's going to launch you farther into your life than you ever thought possible. And I know because I've experienced myself, and this is what I teach to everybody else who goes through my program. And I've won multiple awards from the Department of Veterans Affairs, as a matter of fact, for this program, teaching people how to overcome trauma through this process that we call healing through service, that there's healing from trauma through serving others. And people hear that and they think, oh yeah, right. Well, I mean, I break it down and I show you, this is how the brain operates. This is the medical journals and the medical studies behind it. And then this is the real life application. This is what I've done. This is what other people have done. And here are the results. And I put people through this 6-week long course. And at the end of it, we challenge them to go do some sort of community service in their local neighborhood where they can continue this idea of healing through service and be able to take this to the next level. And so what I do is I take guys who go through the program, they can sign up and then they can go with me. I go once or twice a year down to Mexico. And in 2 days, we'll build a home for a homeless family. And that's our healing through service journey right there. And so guys go through that program. And in 2 days, we built a home for a homeless family using all the skills that we've learned through that 6-week long course. And then they get to experience that for themselves. It's no longer just reading about it, reading about what the brain does, reading about what other people have done. It's experiencing it for themselves and feeling that mental health boost and being like, oh, wow, this really does work. And then when they go home, I plug them into other areas where they can continue serving in their community, serve at their church, serve somewhere with veteran groups, serve at the local YMCA, wherever they feel like they're being called to serve. That's where we want to plug them in. So that way they can continue this lifestyle of healing through serving others. And so in the book that I wrote, I break it down step by step. People can just pick up the book on Amazon and go through it on their own, or they can sign up and I teach a 6-week long course online where guys show up for 90 minutes once a week. And we discuss these chapters. There's these little exercises they go through, and it's really teaching them how to be mentally fit. It's really we teach them that health just isn't physical health, right? Physical training. There's mental training and there's mental fitness that you need to be able to develop along the way as well. And we teach them how to do that.
When you look good, you feel good. Guys, it's about time you threw away those stained t-shirts and those baggy, saggy shorts and upgrade your gym swagger. Xayah Active is the official workout wear of Fireteam Whiskey. Go to bit.ly/Xayah FTW and check out all the styles for women, men, and kids. Yeah, that's so awesome. And I want to backtrack just a second to what you said, that just to reiterate, letting go and the slingshot kind of metaphor that you used, to to reemphasize, letting go doesn't mean denial.
That's right.
I don't want people to confuse that. Letting go is not denial. Letting go is not, okay, forget it happened. and just pretend it didn't happen and, get over it, quote unquote, right?
Right.
Because we hear that a lot with people who go through trauma. It's like, well, why can't he just get over it? Or, it was 10 years ago. Why can't you just get over it? So that's not what we're talking about here when we say let it go. Letting go means that you are moving forward and starting to, I think of it as, okay, if you think of it as a rock, literally, that you're carrying around, a boulder that you're carrying
That's
around on
right.
your back, it's not dropping the rock right away. It's chipping away at pieces of it, doing the hard work to start to drop some of that burden. And then eventually you'll be in a place where maybe that rock is tiny. Maybe it's a little pebble you keep in your pocket, just as a reminder, with all the tools that you picked along the way, because in a lot of ways, I think a lot of people can attest to this, maybe even you too, Sergeant Q. Some of the things that we've been through, the hard shit, has actually resulted in positive, a net
That's right.
gain in our life. So we shouldn't just let it go, because you actually can get a lot of positive things from a negative thing that has happened in your life, right? So, we don't want to, just forget it and deny and pretend it didn't happen. We want to chip away at that rock, do the work, and move forward. So this is what you're doing in your 6-week course, right? You're kind of teaching people how to start chipping away at that rock.
That's exactly right. We want to let go of the pain and the hurt, but there's some great lessons in there, not only for us, but lessons that we can teach to other people along the way. And so that's what the book does. And we really teach people how to reprogram their brain. Like we start teaching about the functions of the brain, how it works, what stress does, what's cortisol, what's adrenaline, what do these things do to our brain, how does it affect the receptors, which allow us to start absorbing different serotonin chemicals and things like that. We experience trauma, the brain receptors, they're like flowers, and they're open and they receive different signals. But as you experience trauma, especially prolonged trauma, those start to shut down. And how do we reopen those? How do we re-engage those? And so we talk about how the brain works, how it operates, and how to take those negative situations and be able to find something positive out of it, so we can reframe that experience and create something positive out of it that we can be proud of. And so a great example is homelessness. Right. So I was homeless as a kid growing up, and then I was homeless again when I came back from Iraq. So anytime somebody talked about homelessness, I was like, I'm out. I don't want to talk about that, because it touched that little bit of pain in my life. I was like, nope, I'm out. I want to talk about something else. Or anytime that I got in trouble at work or I had financial problems, instantly my brain would go to, oh, you're going to be homeless. And I would have a panic attack and be like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. Right. And so some of you guys, I don't know what that is for you who are listening, but we all probably have that thing where when somebody talks about it, we're like, ooh, I don't want to touch it. It's like the stove. It's hot. Like, I don't want to touch it. Right. It hurts. And so you don't want to talk about those things. You don't want to be around those type of things. You don't want to have anything to remind you of that negative experience. And so what we teach people is how to take that negative experience and turning it into something positive. And that's what I've done with homelessness. The first time I was invited to Mexico to build a home for a homeless family, I was like, nope, I'm out. Don't want to do that. Don't want to go overseas, especially not without a weapon. And I definitely don't want to deal with homelessness. Like, I'm out. But I ended up going anyway, because I felt like that's where God was calling me. And so I went. And when I went, it totally changed my perspective on homelessness, because it was the first time that I had a positive experience around homelessness, which helped me reframe that memory. And that's where this idea of healing through service came from. Because if we find, people always ask me, they start going to church and like, well, I want to serve and I don't know what God has for me. I tell them, find your pain, and there your ministry will be also. Because who better to lead somebody out of the darkness than somebody who's walked through it themselves? And so you've got to face those fears, and you don't have to overcome it 100%, but you've got to overcome it enough where you can talk about it and experience it and not have that visceral reaction where your body shuts down, your mind shuts down, and you start going into a PTSD episode. And so in the book, we talk about how the brain operates and how you can reframe those negative experiences into something positive. And so along the way, from the very beginning, we have you start doing these little exercises, right? I basically Mr. Miyagi people through the process, right? We're just painting the fence. They don't know why. So I'm having them do these little exercises, go out and do something nice for somebody every single day. So consciously make a conscious effort, because now we're no longer just a passenger in our day, but we're actually taking an active role in engaging the public and doing something consciously. So we consciously decide that we're going to do something nice for somebody every single day. And we journal that, we record that. And then we do that week after week after week. And then we get to a point in the book where we're like, okay, this is how the brain operates, and this is how you can reframe it to have a better mental health. We have more mental fitness. And a lot of guys are like, well, that's not going to work. I'm like, well, actually, it's already working. Look at your journal. Let's read back through your journal. Let's see how you felt in the beginning, and let's see how you felt now. And each one of them is kind of that aha moment where they're like, wow, that actually does work. I've literally experienced it. And so we talk about that. We have them pick something from their past. It could be anything. We ask them not to pick, the most terrifying mental health issue they've had, but pick something that we can work with. And we kind of work through that all the way through the book and help them reframe that. And then when they go out and do whatever public service, we have them work in an area that's going to touch that a little bit. That way they can start to build positive experiences around that negative interaction. So that way they can start bolstering their mental health. There's a study that was done out of Harvard, and it said that it takes 5 to 7 positive experiences to overcome one negative experience, because our brain has what's called a negative bias. And you guys can Google this, look up negative bias, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. There's been thousands of studies over this concept of the negative bias. And it's really a survival mechanism for us, because if we go out and we eat this pink berry and we get really sick, our body's going to be like, ooh, we don't want to touch that pink berry. Now, talking to military folks, we've all gotten sick on alcohol, right? Like that's just in the Marine Corps, like drinking is a big thing. And so you can probably all remember the first time you got sick on an alcohol. For me, it was black velvet. And even to this day, like if I smell it, I'm like, oh, my stomach turns. I have a visceral reaction to it. I'm like, I don't want to touch that stuff. And so what happens is that when we have that kind of reaction, it's our body's negative bias, our survival instinct kicking in to keep us away from danger, to preserve life. But that happens with the relationships too. So if you have a negative interaction with a friend or family member, it's going to take 5 to 7 positive interactions just to get back to neutral, not even start building relationship, just to get back to neutral. So think about that with your own personal relationships now, right? With people that you no longer have relationship with, maybe. What happened, right? You had some negative experience, which was the catalyst to have you isolate away from that individual. And then you continue to dwell on that negative experience, and you never sought out any kind of reconciliation. You never sought out any kind of other involvement with that individual. So you're stuck. Your last experience with them was negative, and it just stays there. You haven't tried to create any positive interaction. And I deal with this a lot with husbands and wives, right? Like divorce rate is high in the military because we always focus on the negative side of our spouse. So anytime a vet comes to me and I'm working with him and he's like, oh, well, my spouse did, this, this, and this. I'm like, okay, 3 things. Perfect. I'm like, all right, now give me 21 things that you appreciate about your spouse. Well, what do you mean? I said, we're going to sit here all day, bro. Like I need to hear 21 things. And so then they'll do that. And I say, okay, well, how do you feel now? Well, they feel a lot better because I'm teaching them how to overcome that negative bias. And so these are things that you have to practice every single day, right? And so you'll appreciate this because you work in fitness, right? And so I give this analogy. It's so funny. Everybody, like right now, gym memberships are going through the roof, right? Like everybody's buying gym memberships because like, oh, I'm going to get fit in 2022 and I'm going to lose all this weight. And so for the first 30 days, man, they're at it. They're at it every day. They're working out. February, March comes, maybe they're in the gym 1 or 2 days a week. And by June, there ain't nobody in there but the gym rats that's just, pumping iron. Well, why is that? Because they didn't have the discipline to keep going. Everybody has these great intentions, but they didn't have the discipline to stick to it. And that's what happens with our mental health as well, is that we have to have the discipline to stick with it. Guys go through my program and they do great for a couple months and then they start to fall off. And then I get these emails or phone calls like, oh, your program didn't work. Like, okay, well, are you doing your journaling? Well, no, I haven't been doing that in a while. Okay. Well, are you practicing these things? Well, no, I haven't. So, okay, well, where are you serving? Well, I don't have time to serve right now. So, okay, so the program works. You're just not using it, bro. You got to do these things every single day to stay fit, just like working out. You can't work out 1 day a week and think that that's going to keep you fit. Like that's just not going to work. You got to be practicing these mental tools every single day so you can be fit to fight in this new battlefield, the battlefield of the mind.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And it is a battlefield. I mean, we all go through landmines and wars and battles in life. Life is hard sometimes. We all don't just walk through life and it's unicorns and rainbows and everything's wonderful. Things are going to go to shit. You're going to have a fight. You're going to have a death in the family. You're going to have something bad happen. You're going to get laid off. You're going to, there's so many things. So are you prepared? Just like when we were in the military, you always had a contingency plan, right? We that was ingrained in our brains over and over again in the military. We had a contingency plan. We trained every day for the what if, right?
That's right.
It didn't mean the what if was going to happen, but we were ready for it if it did. So how come we don't do that in our everyday lives? We should be doing that, right?
Absolutely.
So sure, maybe you have a great relationship with your spouse right now, but hey, things change. What if? What if things get hard? What if one of you loses their job and you're experiencing financial stressors and you're starting to fight, right? Or you have a kid introduced to the world and everything's stressful now and nobody's sleeping. And,
That's right.
Sure, it could be magical and rainbows right now, but the what ifs will happen eventually. So why aren't we training for them now instead of waiting till, the shit hits the fan and everything's falling apart and you're a mess and you're all stressed out and you're not prepared for the situation. So it is about being fit to fight. And that's why we use that, that motto with Fireteam Whiskey. It's not just about having big muscles and biceps. I have nice biceps, but that's not because I want nice biceps. It's because I want to be fit. It's because I want to burn more fat. It's because I want to be physically ready for whatever comes at me. I want to have a healthy body. I want to live my life to the fullest, right? So there's a lot of other reasons to work on these things and not just, having a plus if you go to a mental health provider and they, check you, give you a smiley face and say you're good to go, right? It's about living your optimal life. And I love that you use service. I love that's a main tier of your approach. And, you don't hear that much. You see, courses and therapies and interventions and that kind of stuff. But the service aspect is really unique to what you guys do. So why was it so important to include that in, your 6-week course?
So I will answer that question, but I actually have a question for you and it'll lead right into this. Actually, it's perfect. So you talk about, fit to fight and you call yourself Fireteam Whiskey, right? And so, and I looked on your guys' app and a big part of it is accountability, right? And a fire team. So maybe unpack that a little bit for me. Why do you guys operate in this fire team mentality? And what is that accountability? What does that look like? And how does that work with people achieving their goals?
Yeah. So, when I created Fireteam Whiskey, our programming, I used the kind of the base concept of a fire team. So obviously you were a Marine, so you know very well what a fire team is. So for those of you out there who don't, it's basically the kind of smallest element in the military. It's 4 or 5, maybe 7 guys and gals who all kind of have different specialties, right? And you all have different MOSs and you're all good at certain things. But when you're put together as a team, you're a great team to accomplish a mission and you do it together. So maybe in one area, I'm not very strong, but we've got somebody on our team that's strong in that area, right? So we are able to accomplish the mission together. So that's what I wanted to create out of Fireteam Whiskey. So, we have more experts in nutrition. We have more experts in behavior change. We are more experts in fitness. Like, I'm not a bodybuilder, but I've got a guy who's a bodybuilder, so if somebody wants to bodybuild, then we, get him involved. So we have experts. So we basically, when you join Fireteam Whiskey, you join our fire team and you become a part of our team. And we work to accomplish the mission together using our expertise to get you to, accomplishing that mission. So if you try to do it solo, you can only go so far because you don't have expertise in everything. You're not a nutrition expert. You're not, maybe not a bodybuilding expert. You basically, maybe don't really even know how to use the gym equipment correctly. So, we kind of meet you where you're at and then surround you with experts, kind of train you up and get you moving to accomplish your mission. So it is a huge part of that is accountability because, we can't leave you behind, right? You're a part of our fire team now. There's no man left behind.
That's
So
right.
when you stumble, we stop and we figure it out and we fix it and then we move forward. So, we're not crossing that finish line without you. So we may have to push you, prod you, give you a little tough love to get you there, but we're going to do what we need to do to get you to accomplish that mission.
That's awesome. John Maxwell, I don't know if you know who John Maxwell is, but he's an international speaker, trainer, and coach for leadership. And he said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And it's so true. You need each other. And so a lot of times in the military, we're working in these fire teams, in these small units, and it's why we're so successful. And when we get out of the military, we kind of just drop that pack and are like, I don't want to do anything with veterans. I just want to do this on my own, right? And for some reason, we think that that's the right thing to do, even though all of our military training tells us different. I tell guys, like, you didn't fight the war alone, so don't fight mental health alone either. And to your point, and you'll appreciate this, I think, the Department of the Army, they did a 40-year-long study to determine why the military was so formidable on the battlefield. And they narrowed it down to one single element. Do you know what that is? The squad. Because we fight in squads, which there's like 3 fire teams make a squad. Because we fight in squads, these small units were more effective because every member of the squad values the squad over themselves. And therefore, they will fight harder and longer to stay alive because they don't want to let the squad down. And on the other side of that, every member of that squad knows that if they get injured or pinned down, that their fire team is coming for them because we're never going to leave a man behind. And so that's why we're so effective. 40 years they did this study to determine why we're so effective on the battlefield. And that's the number one element, the squad. And you've already figured that out, Stephanie. And that's what I figured out too. I put guys back into squads. When we go to Mexico and we build a home for a homeless family, we put them back into squads. We reintroduce the squad concept to help them be successful in their civilian life, just like they were in their military life. And so the same thing with the active service, right? We go out and we want to serve the community. And you can only do so much as if you're one person. But if you're a squad, if you're a group of guys or gals, you go out and you want to serve your community, you can do amazing things. And there's groups out there that are doing this very successfully. Look at Team Rubicon, look at Team Red, White, and Blue, look at the Mission Continues. Like, they all understand, like, this idea of service is helping them. Now, I don't think they understand it to the level that I do, or they'd be teaching these courses like I do, right? They understand, like, getting people together, it helps them, it boosts their mental health, and they can go do great things in the community. They understand it. I unpack that, and so I work with some of these guys in Mission Continues and Team Red, White, and Blue and Team Rubicon to unpack, like, why you're experiencing this. Like, let me show you why, and try and introduce this curriculum. Like, this is something that you can utilize with your teams when you go out, is to share with them why they're having these experiences. And this is how altruism and volunteerism can help boost mental health. And then you rebuild your own communities. And so the churches are my favorite people to work with, because a church needs a lot of volunteers to keep the doors open and keep things running, right? It probably takes about 30 people every Sunday to run a Sunday service. When you talk about people opening it up, cleaning the bathrooms, setting up the chairs, running the lights, running the sound equipment, the people who are singing, doing the slides, like, it's about 30 people that aren't getting paid. They're all volunteers. And so the churches, I really try and show them this curriculum, and I have several churches that are using it to help them better serve their population, right? Like, teaching them, like, hey, this is why we serve, because we actually receive mental health benefit from it. And then I show them scripture as well. In my book, I go through a lot of scripture. Even if people aren't Christians, it's totally fine. You can still at least respect the Bible for it being a very accurate historical document, right? And so I show them that this is what the Bible's been telling us for 2,000 years, and this is what science is saying. And they're not at odds. They actually are the exact same thing. And so in my book, I break that down and show people that this idea of faith, hope, and love that's in the Bible is actually the formula to us living successful mental health lives, is being able to utilize these things. And here's the science that backs it up.
Yeah.
And so that's why we do the whole idea of service, is because there's healing through serving others. And I showed the medical data behind it, the research studies, and the scriptural application. And then we take that whole concept. Every chapter is a new concept that we go over, and we have those 3 components in it. And then we take those 3 components and we create an action item, something they can go do right now today, utilizing what we just learned. That way they can see it in their own life. And so some of the guys that have gone through my program have gone on to do amazing things out in the world because they're utilizing this on a daily basis.
Are you fire team ready? Try the Fire Team Whiskey Spec Ops Keto Joe Shake. The Keto Joe Shake is a medium chain triglyceride MCT shake derived from non-GMO coconut oil. It contains 17 grams of MCT, 10 grams of high-quality whey protein, and no sugar. It's sweetened with stevia leaf, so you can keep those carbs low and shred that body fat. 25 milligrams of caffeine to give you extra energy for the gym or your busy day. Fire Team Whiskey has been supplying military members deployed all over the world with Spec Ops shakes for over 3 years. Fire Team Whiskey Spec Ops shakes are fueling the fight. Whether you are just trying to lose a few pounds or trying to get that extra edge in the gym, the Fire Team Whiskey Spec Ops shakes are for you. Make sure to stock up now and support our efforts to raise funds for Team RWB, our nonprofit partner that provides social support and fitness events for our nation's heroes.
Yeah, and I love that because it's not just about, so I won't name the organizations, but there are a few who we have decided as Fire Team Whiskey not to do things with because their group get-togethers are not focused on service or a specific mission. It's more just kind of, we're just getting together and we're just telling a bunch of war stories and drinking a lot of beer. And that's not helpful. It's not. It's not a productive activity, and we don't support that as Fire Team Whiskey as an organization. So I'm very careful about who we affiliate with, in that aspect. And I love that your get-togethers are focused on service. It is about, doing something helpful for the community, for another person, and you're getting those mental health benefits from that service. So, it's a win-win for sure. So can you tell people where to find out about your book and the 6-week course and the trips that you do?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. You can look up sergeantq.net. So sergeantq.net is that's where you can find all these resources. You can book me to come and speak if you have an engagement, which I'll be in North Carolina speaking next month. So you can book me there. You can also find my book. It's on Amazon. It's called Healing Through Service, The Warrior's Guidebook to Overcoming Trauma. And so it's right there. You can find that on Amazon or Audible, or you can buy it from my publisher. And then the course is healingthroughservice.com. So healingthroughservice.com. That's where you can sign up for the course, and there's a link to buy the book there too. So for your listeners out there, if you guys want to sign up for this, I teach every quarter, and so I'm in the middle of a course right now. I started it early because I'm going to be doing this big speaking thing, but if you use the promo code podcast, you'll get a discount on, it's like a 40% discount on the group teaching. And so I want to get this in the hands of as many people as I can. So in North Carolina, there's a pastor that invited me out. I'll be basically teaching. There's like 50 different churches that'll be represented out there. And I'll be teaching them how to utilize this program inside their church to better serve the veterans that are coming in from all those military facilities there, how to better reach those guys. Because when I first started going to church, a lot of these guys didn't understand me or where I was coming from. I really felt like an outsider. It took a lot of hard work to feel like I was understood inside the church. And so now I create this resource for pastors to be able to use. It's designed as a small group study. So it's 6 weeks long, teach people how to utilize it. Churches already use a small group study type curriculum. And so I designed this to work right along with what they're doing right now. So I'll be out there teaching them this curriculum as well.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk about Pop Smoke if you have time to do that. Let's talk about the Pop Smoke app, because I love that concept that you use on the Pop Smoke app. So let's tell people about that. Yeah,
so Operation Pop Smoke. So this was really just birthed out of a burden that I had trying to help veterans, guys who go through my program and they do really well. And like I said before, they would kind of crash, right? They'd burn in. And, some of them would start feeling suicidal again. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, why is this happening? And so I was in the middle of writing my book and it was about ready to go to publishing. And I was just struggling with this. And I remember I just prayed to God. I said, God, I don't understand what is happening. I just had one of my guys who was feeling suicidal. We literally did a grid by grid search of this guy in the city, trying to find him because his wife said, hi, he's been drinking. He feels suicidal. He just left his parents' house. He said he's going to be coming here. He's walking. So I sent out 2 teams to go find this guy. And I'm in Mexico at the time, and I'm trying to coordinate, these 2 teams to try and find this guy, figuring out this is the most direct route. He's on foot. And so finally we find him and he's standing on an overpass, getting ready to jump off this thing. And 2 of my guys, they roll up and do a textbook snatch and grab on this guy, bring him in, take him to the VA hospital, put him on a 48-hour mental health hold. And so I remember I was just sitting there, I was just praying. I'm like, God, I don't like this program works, but what's happening? What is going wrong here? And I said, I don't understand it. Just show me what I'm supposed to do here. And I woke up the next morning and I had these visions in my head. And so I sketched them out on a notebook, just like photos. And I sketched them out with a little, like couple sentences underneath. And I called my buddy who's a filmmaker with Knox Studio. And I said, hey man, I've got this, I need to shoot this video. Can you help me? And he's like, well, what's the concept? And I sent him over. He's like, oh, you wrote a storyboard already. And I was like, what's a storyboard? He's like, well, this is it. Like, this is the scene and this is what's happening. I'm like, cool. I woke up this morning and that's what I saw in my head. So I wrote it out. So anyway, we filmed this whole thing. And the first time that I sat down and watched it was the first time I realized exactly what I needed to build. And I built this app called Operation Pop Smoke. And so there's a bunch of elements inside the app, which I'll go over. So in the military, and you alluded to it in the very beginning, right? We want to pop smoke because we want to get out of here. That's a term that we use. Like, hey man, Gunny's looking for 2 volunteers. Like, ooh, I'm going to pop smoke, man. I'm out. Like, I'm going to leave the area because I don't want to get caught up in whatever needs to get done. But I use smoke a lot on the battlefield. I was a forward observer, so I call in air artillery mortars. I run 9-line briefs, which means I'm getting wounded out of the battlefield. And I use smoke to designate LZs, landing zones. So I'll pop a red smoke and I'll throw it on the battlefield. And then the bird will see that and they'll come down and they know that's where we're going to pick up all the wounded. And everybody else on the battlefield knows that's a casualty collection point. So if you've got wounded or dead, you need to bring them there ASAP so they can get airlifted out. And you're probably going to get resupplied at the same time. So people know that. I also use white smoke to designate a target, to be able to throw smoke on the battlefield. And then when the plane's coming in, I can direct them, say from the smoke, it's going to be 800 meters to the northwest by the river where it bends in a U. It's a marker where they can see that and head toward it. So that's why we call it Operation Pop Smoke. So in the app, we base it on the squad mentality, which you and I talked about, right? So it's 4 guys that you know and trust that are going to be there to help you when you're struggling with mental health, that you can be raw and real with. And so remember, the squad is the #1 reason that we're successful on the battlefield. And we reintroduce that back to the veteran's life so that way they can be successful as a civilian. So you've got these 4 guys that are going to be there to help you and you're going to help them. It goes both ways. And so really at its basic form, it's just a messaging chat app. It's a secure private messaging chat app where you can chat back and forth. Now, it's not like social media. You cannot search for anybody on this thing. If you download the app and then you send out and you create a squad and you send out an SMS or a text message, an email or a text message in the form of an SMS, and it goes to the people that you want in your squad. When they click that, it brings them, they download the app, it brings them automatically into your squad. So there's no searching for anybody or anything like that. There's not even an option to do that. So you're in that group and now you're there to help one another. So you just chat back and forth. So if somebody's struggling with mental health, what I learned by researching this, I watched hundreds of hours of interviews with people who had survived suicide attempts. And the one thing that they had in common was that they all said they regretted that attempt. The moment that they initiated the suicide, they instantly regretted it. And these are guys like jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, had shot themselves, had done whatever. The minute that they had initiated that suicide attempt, they regretted it. And so I started unpacking. It's like, well, what does this mean? And through my research, I found out that when people are going through a mental health crisis, part of their brain actually shuts down. So their cognitive thought process, the process that has good decision-making skills, long-term planning, and the ability to overcome impulses is reduced. And so it's not that people actually want to end their life. They just they don't want to continue to live the way that they're living. And when they have the impulse to commit suicide, they act on it. without being able to process through that moment in time, because that part of their brain shuts down. So their brain is malfunctioning. It's not that they want to actually end their life. Their brain's just malfunctioning. They cannot process through it. So the app helps them do that, because now when they start to feel that anxiety or they start to feel suicidal, they don't have to think about who am I going to call, what am I going to say, I'm going to be embarrassed. All of those faculties are removed from their brain already. They're not having that cognitive thought process. So now they can just push one single button on their app and it sends an alert out, like an Amber Alert, to their friends that are on the app with them. Now, two things happen. So we'll talk about the individual, what happens when they press the button, and then we'll talk about the squad. So the first thing for the individual, when they press that button, now they have limited impulse control. So if they say, oh, I start to feel suicidal, maybe I should push the button, they're not going to process through it. They're just going to push it because they lack the impulse control. So on impulse, they're going to push the button, which is great. They push the button. Instantly for them, it starts what we call a cognitive reconditioning program. Now, I didn't create this. This has been widely used in the mental health arena for decades. It's commonly called a grounding technique. And so it's a series of 5 questions that are designed to bring your cognitive thought process back online. Because when people are struggling with mental health, they're stuck in this subconscious part of their mind, which is usually a traumatic memory. And they're stuck in this traumatic memory and they can't get out. So they're not seeing reality. They're reliving this traumatic event that they experienced, and they're stuck there. They can't get out. So what this does is it brings their conscious mind back to the forefront so they can start having good decision-making skills. So they push the button. It asks 5 questions, name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can touch, all these questions. And as that's happening, it's bringing that cognitive thought process back to the front so they can avoid impulses and they can have good decisions. So when they finish that, it takes about 12 to 14 seconds. When they finish that, it automatically takes them into the messaging app where they're chatting with their friends and family, right? Whoever they put on the app. So instantly takes them into there and they're waiting for their friends and family. Now, if their friends and family don't answer up, they have 5 minutes. If they don't answer up, it automatically turns them over to the suicide hotline. Automatically. It just automatically puts it in their auto dialer and it starts sending that stuff out. And so we don't use the suicide hotline. What we use for the veteran version, because we have civilian version, but for the veteran version, we use the veteran crisis line that's run out of Rutgers University by veterans. So that's the emergency line that it goes to as a fail-safe. But the goal is to have it never actually go there. The goal is that one of those other 3 guys are going to answer up on the chat, because it's going to pop up on your phone like an Amber Alert. You'll click it and it takes you into that chat feature and you can start chatting with that individual who's in distress. But here's the really cool thing. Even if that individual doesn't answer up, if they go dark or they start saying things that are really dark, it doesn't even matter, because when they initiated that signal, it automatically turned on their GPS locator on their phone. And now that squad can navigate directly to that individual's position or direct emergency services there. Because if there has been a suicide attempt, those moments really, really matter. So the faster we can get to them, the better. And that's really the basics of Operation Pop Smoke. Now, since then, we've partnered with a medical group out of North Carolina called Cone Health. And so they invested some money into it. And we were able to build out another component to it, which is what we call the daily mental health wellness check. And so every day this thing pops up on your phone as an alert, you select it and it asks you 4 questions, and then it disappears. At the end of the week, you get an email that shows you your mental health data for the day or for the week, the month, and the year to date. So you can start tracking your own mental health data. And the really cool thing is that if you're being seen by a mental health professional, you can share this data with them. There is a dashboard for mental health professionals to be able to log in and track their patient's data daily. So if this person their mental health scores start to decline, that mental health professional can reach out to them and offer support before they get into crisis. So it's really, really important. It just finished its medical trials actually at a Cone Health in North Carolina, and we had 100% success rate. So they were giving this to everybody who came into the emergency department. They offered them the app, said you want to be part of the trial. Anybody who came in with suicidal ideations, they offered them this app. Everybody who used it, there was 100% survival rate and 0% recidivism. And so that's really the key component right there, is the recidivism rate, which means if somebody comes into the hospital system for suicidal ideations, there's a 40% chance they're going to come back within the first 90 days for the same thing. And so that's a huge burden on the healthcare system to the tune of $69 billion is what it costs the healthcare system. And so by utilizing this app, they were able to support this individual before they came back into crisis mode. And so it saved them over $1 million that during the trial. But we had zero people come back into the ED looking for help for suicidal ideations. So the app works. It works fantastic, but it's like a seatbelt. It only works if you put that bad boy on. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's kind of the long story of how that app.
I love it. And I
happened.
mean, it does everything, because if you're a mental health professional, you already know this, but if you don't, the number one determinate if I'm going to see you again with a suicidal ideation or attempt is social support. That's the number one determinant.
That's right.
It's whether or not you have it and whether or not it's strong. And that's the missing piece with medical services. Great, they're there for you in an emergency, but they're not providing that social support you need in your everyday life. So they're kind of the catch-all when it comes to people who are in crisis, but they're not really able to do anything to prevent it, because the only way to prevent it is to have that support in place and available, when this person comes into crisis, because that's how they end up in the ER. So you're building that into these people's lives is, okay, whatever's going on with you, whatever's happening, whatever relationships you have, okay, apparently, these aren't what you need right now. You need a built-in social support. Who are the 4 or 5 people that that can make this pact with you and surround you with the support that you need, so you can eventually, so you can do the hard work and eventually heal and, and not need this, kind of level of propping up anymore. But, it's not for people who are in crisis either. I mean, it's just, we all have bad days, right? And
That's right.
like you said, going back to what you said at the beginning, a majority of us are in this silent majority, and we just kind of, have our bad days, and some people just kind of don't know why we're in a bad mood for a few days, and we kind of work through it, and then we get past it and we move on. And that's what we do. But if we had that Pop Smoke app, if we're able to have people we trust and that social support to kind of work us through that, maybe we'll get out of that funk a little sooner. Maybe we kind of get pulled into, doing an activity that we wouldn't normally do. We'd probably just kind of hang out at home and watch Netflix and brood and, feel sorry for ourselves for a few days. And maybe they get us to get out. And I love that. I'm glad you mentioned that video on your website, the Pop Smoke video. I really love the video. That's the thing that caught my eye when I went to the website. I was like, wow, this is a really touching video. Like, this describes exactly what people need who are struggling with mental health issues. It's that team of support, that fire team, to kind of surround them and to help them accomplish their mission. And no one gets left behind. So, when you fall and you falter and you fall on the battlefield, they're coming for you.
That's right.
So I love that. And another aspect that I love about your app is that, even if you personally don't need it, you can donate it to someone who does. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we started with just veterans, right? I was very short-sighted. I was like, I'm just going to help vets, but then this hospital system got a hold of me. And so now it's in emergency rooms and things like that. And so if people want to donate apps, absolutely, because they donate apps, and then we give them out through my nonprofit, which is called Q Missions, which runs all of the trips to Mexico and Haiti and Honduras and all these things that we do all over the world. Like, that's Cambodia right back there that some veterans and I were building. Children at Risk Center. It was a children at risk center. It's designed to help prevent sex trafficking is what they do down there. And so we built this center for them. But the app, it's so if people want to donate, they can donate, and then we'll give those out. So it started out as just $1 a month, but as it grew and grew and needed more server space, and then it had to put all these fail safes in place for HIPAA compliance, stuff like that, because it went through medical trials. And so I had to create this more robust thing. It's about $24 a month right now. And so what we're trying to do is partner with organizations that want to provide this to their members, like the VFW, AMVETS, other organizations like mine, like Q Missions, who want to provide this tool to the members as a benefit to them. The other way that we're looking at doing it is like through hospital systems, where a hospital can now give this out to people coming into the emergency room, or like a large employer like Cone Health, they provide this to their employees through their employee benefit program. And so we don't really want to make this, people can go on the App Store and they can download it and they can use it, and that's great. Absolutely, you can do that. But I'd much rather partner with an organization that helps people get connected with this app, because just having the app is great, but just a fire team on their own out there on the battlefield, they're effective, but they really need that support from higher headquarters, right? So here's a great example. If I have a fire team and one of their guys is having problems with alcohol, right? And so they develop a plan like, hey, look, man, you're only suicidal when you've been drinking. So the next time that you're suicidal and you're drunk, we're going to take you in and get you into this 30-day inpatient treatment program. You all agree to that. Now that time comes and they're calling around trying to get them into that inpatient treatment. And they're like, oh, well, it's going to take 60 to 90 days to get them in. It's really, really tough to get into those things. But if you have an organization behind you, if I call and I'm the founder of Q Missions, which is an award-winning nonprofit here in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm part of the Seattle Seahawks Task Force 12, if I make the phone call and say, hey, I got one of my guys, do you have a bed for him? Magically, a bed opens up immediately. And so that's the power that an organization has to better serve either the people that they're serving or their employees. Is they have this robust network of partnerships that they can access, as where the individual fire team doesn't, the organization does. And so if an organization wants to provide this to its members, so if there's a company out there, let's say Google or Facebook or whoever wants to provide this to their members, they can do that. And they get to choose what resources are available to that individual. So they give us the list of resources. So on the resource page, it's all there laid out, the resources that that company wants them to utilize. So they already have an employee benefits specialist that has all these benefits. And so we make that accessible from the app so they can click it and use it. And then we can help them track that as well. So they can see what resources that they're providing are actually being used and which ones aren't. So at the end of the year, they can do a cost savings analysis and say, hey, we have 20 of these things, but only 4 of them are actually being used. Do we need to actually invest in something that's not being utilized? And so that's a service that we can provide as well. But really the strength is in that organization, that parent organization. It makes that fire team so much stronger, so much more robust, and so much more effective to helping the individual who's in distress.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Well, awesome. Wow, we talked about a lot of stuff today.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so we'll include all the links in the show notes, but so everybody knows where to go for the book, for the 6-week course, for the app. Is there any final thoughts, any final comments you want to add before we close out here?
You know, one thing, that I wanted to mention is that the app and the company right now, it's really just my wife and I that are trying to run this thing and get it out there. And you can see, I mean, I have a janitorial company and this curriculum and teaching. I have a lot of stuff on my plate. So what we're doing right now is we're actually going out and we're doing pitch decks to find investors who want to invest in this app, so I can basically hire a whole nother team that can go out and start putting this into hospital systems. We already have the medical data. It's already been validated. There's going to be a white paper published on it by the end of the year. And all I need now is a financial injection so I can hire this team so they can go out and roll this out into all these emergency rooms. And it's really a no-brainer. When somebody goes into the hospital for suicidal ideations, it costs that hospital on average of $50,000 per occurrence. Yeah. And so what happens is that the insurance company will pay for the first time. But if they come back, that recidivism rate, they change the rules and say, we're not going to cover that anymore. Mm-hmm. That burden is going to be shifted to the hospital system. Yeah. And so now the hospital systems have this huge burden on them to find solutions. And we've seen a 20% uptick in suicide in every single demographic since the pandemic started. So it was a bad problem that just got even worse because of the isolation that everybody and the stress that everybody's been experiencing because of the pandemic. So this is the perfect time to introduce a tool like this, because hospitals are going to want to use it because it's a cost savings for them, right? Yeah, they have to pay for it to give to the patient. But when you look at $24 a month versus $50,000 per occurrence, it's really a no-brainer on which one you want to have to pay for. And so I just need to be able to hire a team that I can put out there and start getting this rolled out in these different hospital systems across the nation. So if there's anybody out there who's interested in hearing this pitch deck and wanting to become part of our financial team to help us roll this thing out, I'd love to hear from you. sergeantq.net, hit me up and spend 30 minutes with you, go through all the ins and outs of the app, how it works, and how you can become a financial investor.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sergeant Q. This was a great discussion, conversation, and thank you for all of your work and service and dedication to healing, the mental health wounds of not only veterans, but, and anybody struggling with mental health issues out there. And I salute you for your dedication, your hard work, and thanks so much for being on the Warrior Wellness podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. And I love that you've found that squad mentality, just like I have. So many other veterans out there have figured this thing out, and I just think it's fantastic. So good on you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks so much again for joining us on another episode of the Warrior Wellness Podcast. Please make sure to subscribe, follow, like, all that good stuff on your favorite podcast platform and on our YouTube channel. Go ahead and leave us a review while you're there. And if you screenshot your review, email it to info@fireteamwhiskey.com with your name and address. You'll be entered into our drawing for a prize for just leaving us a review. So let us know what we're doing great, what you'd like to hear more about. And please go ahead and just give us a follow and give us a honest review, especially on iTunes, because that helps us reach other military members, veterans, and first responders with this vitally important information about how to improve their health, fitness, and wellness. We will see you at the next episode of the Warrior Wellness Podcast. I am your podcast host, former Army Captain Stephanie Lincoln, founder of Fire Team Whiskey. Fire Team Whiskey is proud to sell Xayah athletic wear. We love the awesome styles, amazing quick dry technology, and best of all, the price. Xayah Active is the official workout wear of Fire Team Whiskey. Go to bit.ly/XayahFTW and check out all the styles for women, men, and kids.